Welcome everybody to this training session this is the second in our series of guidance document training, and it's a little light attendance, I guess, because it's summertime and it's so hot out, but it'll be a good session today. There are DEP folks and external folks in the room at the same time. You should say hello to each other. Did anybody? Did everybody but him? Don't say hello to him. No. And we have how many online? We have 140 people online. Hello, people online. Did everybody say hello to the people online? There you go. Okay. When we get the question and answer parts of this presentation, we will take questions from the audience here, and we'll take questions from online, as it's a chat function. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to have Dan Toder, who is with the LSRPA and works on continuing education. We work with him all the time and developing good information and training for you guys, and he's a co-sponsor of this event. Dan?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Tess. You're going to have a great session today. You've got a couple of speakers who are very knowledgeable about presumptive remedies and alternative remedies. Lynn Mitchell and John Ober are going to talk to you today, and they have been working diligently on that guidance document committee. So I think you'll get a lot out of that and enjoy the morning session. Everybody had a cup of coffee? Some Dunkin' Donut munchkins? No? Next slide, Joe. We want to thank the people who paid for that. And they are our annual sponsors. They keep us going as far as funding goes, and that's very important to us. And it's also our organization, the LSRPA, is funded by our members' annual dues, and that's where we get our money from. So I want to take some time to thank these folks for providing. Every time we have one of these sessions, we bring in food sometimes we have pizza in the back and so on. Today we have coffee and munchkins because it's in the morning, and these 7 companies paid for it. So we want to say thank you to Accutest Labs, AWT Environmental, Borbas Surveying, East Coast Drilling, EST Remediation Contractors, Hampton Clark Veritech Labs, and Riker Danzig Attorneys at Law. Thank you very much for our sustenance. I want to tell you about some training that we have planned for the future. As all of us know, we need to learn constantly about the new programs that we have. We're going to have 15 guidance documents hitting us. Some have already hit us, and we're going to have a lot more. Just to let you know, well, the first thing coming up after this one, we're having a practical applications, hands-on kind of workshop at Rutgers. Sorry, folks, it's all filled up. It was filled up in about 4 days. Only 100 people can attend because we're going to do breakout groups, and we're going to, discuss specific case histories and actually process them through the site remediation system. So that should be a very good course. We're going to offer that again probably in the fall. So look for that again. It's at Rutgers, and it's called the Practical Applications Site Remediation course. So that's coming up on August the 10th. How many have signed up for that? Okay. we have one from this group, but I know that 100 people have signed up for it. That should be really good. Some of the other training sessions like this that are going to come starting in September, IECs, historic fill, alternative fill guidance training is going to come out in October. We have QA/QC guidance, vapor intrusion, ecological investigations, PASI, and we're going to schedule one of these per month on average. So keep tabs on your DEP website. Keep tabs on the lsrpa.org website, because that's where you'll find these announcements. And I think we have it so that if you're on the listservs, you'll get hit with these announcements anyway, and you'll be able to sign up for them. Okay, next slide. Why join the LSRPA? This is my favorite slide. First thing is you're going to save money. LSRPs are going to have to take a lot of courses because there are continuing ed requirements that are going to come around. And every time there's a course, I know that when NJIT gives a course or Rutgers gives a course or one of those universities, there's going to be a discount for LSRPA members. So you take a few courses and you're going to save a $150 registration fee. So it's well worth joining. Networking opportunities. I have met 100,000 people through the LSRPA. My Rolodex is like, 400 times what it was. And as you meet new people, you get to learn things too. So and that goes for your professional development. So join the association because you really get a lot out of it. And there are a few other benefits that you see there. Next one, Joe. We are divided up into committees. A lot of us are working on these guidance documents and issues that are part of the site remediation program. You can see that one of your speakers today, John Oberer, is on the licensing board committee. He does a lot with the licensing board. He liaises a lot with them. I am on the continuing ed, and you see some other committees here. If you decide to join our association, please get involved with one of these committees because then you'll have a voice in how the site remediation program develops. Next one, Joe. The biggest committee we have is the regulatory outreach. And all of these items that you see here, I couldn't fit them on unless I put them on one line, and I made acronyms out of them. So you have IECs and VIs, and all the things that we're talking about today are covered by our outreach committee, and those are divided up into subcommittees, and each one of these items that you see here is a subcommittee. So we're all of us, a lot of us are working from the LSRPA side to help the DEP and also to hone the program. Next one. How to become a member, very easy. All you have to do is go online, lsrpa.org, or you can do it by paper if you feel more comfortable. We have a registration form, and we have those out at the desk outside where you're registered, so you can pick one of those up. And as I said before, the fee is $150. And if you're a student, and you have to be like an undergrad student, kind of like full-time. You can't just take one course at a college and claim you're a student. Anyway, $150 and get you in. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great session, and we'll see you around, I hope. Take care. I'm going to break this.
Here's the next slide. Not yet. Okay. We're not sure how this slide got in here, but it's very important that you not have your cell phones ringing. We figured it was fortuitous, especially because somebody's always rings. And actually in other training, people are text messaging while they're walking. It's not good. All right, next slide. Okay. This just is a lovely, colorful picture to make the point how important guidance is. It's one of the building blocks of the program. Between rules and guidance, that is the essential support and the substance of the new program as we're putting it into place. Next. Why stakeholder input? All of these technical guidance documents were put together with stakeholder input. Well, first of all, the legislature told us we had to. But is that all? No. Actually, in the beginning it was. No. We had to do it. It was part of SARA. They said that all guidance had to be developed with stakeholder input. And I'll tell you, it became more than that, more than your parents making you weed the garden or whatever. It became a very important, substantive reasonable, well thought out ways to develop guidance with the people who need to apply it. Everybody has been developing their guidance document based on consensus. They're improving our working relationships with people on the outside, and we are building the know-how through training. We're taking that guidance and these committees that are made of DEP staff and external stakeholders and doing the training like we are today. I want to say a word about the technical guidance committees. The members were selected specifically to create a balance of technical expertise, regulatory knowledge, and practical application. They were chaired by a DEP staff person, and each committee had a representative from the DEP Technical Oversight Guidance team, myself, Tessie Fields, and Kathy Coons is on that, Joe Novak, George Nicholas, and Sue Shannon were part of the oversight team, and we witnessed the thought process and the discussions that went on in order to create these documents. Next. Each of the stakeholder committees discussed the tech, they worked on the tech rule requirements for the technical topics. The goal was to remove a lot of the very prescriptive, detailed requirements out of the tech rules and put them into guidance. They coordinated closely with the tech rule writing team, the rule team, and I believe that rule will be coming out in late August. August 15th? August 15th. It was, and I hate to tell you this, it's going to ruin your summer. It's 800 pages long. A lot of it is summary, but it's substantial. So it's great beach reading. When you get it printed and then you put like a bodice ripper picture on the front, you'll do fine at the beach. Okay, next slide. As most of you have heard this talk before, rules contain the what must be accomplished and includes new standards and regulatory requirements. These are the enforceable provisions, and guidance is the how-to for rule requirements. They're scientifically defensible, technical approaches. They identify methods and approaches that will be acceptable to the department. Okay, next slide. There are 16 guidance committees. Right now, 3 documents are finalized and posted on the website. That was receptor evaluation and NAPL and presumptive remedies that just got posted yesterday. So 10 additional guidance documents were issued in draft, and 1 is still open for comment. The groundwater SIRIRA comment period closes at the end of August. And 4 more guidance committees are going to be putting out their documents for comment over the next few months. That will be linear construction, analytical methods, compliance attainment, and technical impracticability. And I think that might be it. Anybody questions about the setup? We're going to, these guys are going to hold questions to the end of their talks, but they have case studies and you have colorful handouts. I mean, what more could you want? Right? And here's Lynn Mitchell. She was the chairperson. She is the chairperson for this committee. Hold on.
I would like to welcome everybody to our discussion on the guidance document. I'd like to talk about the committee members. There are 4 of them that are listed here, but there were many people who were involved in this process for the past couple of years trying to get this together, as well as many stakeholder groups that we had met with. So there's been a lot of people, and there were actually 2 drafts of the guidance document that went out, so we've been trying very hard to get this to as best a shape as we can for this conversation now today. The first thing, big question is, what is a presumptive remedy? So I want to start out with giving you the answer. It's a remedy that is pre-approved, that can be used as is. Go into more detail in a little bit. Would remind everybody to look at your colorful handout, which is a copy of Table 5.1. For anybody who's listening, since you don't have the handout, this is in the guidance document. Appendix C of the guidance document, which is now online, has this chart. So this will help you through our presentation if you take a look at that handout. Today we will cover presumptive remedies, case studies, and John will go over the alternative remedies. When I'm done with discussing presumptive remedies, we will give you examples and we will provide you contact information. So basically, presumptive remedies. We had to do this because it was in the statute. We were required to come up with them. They are required for when there is remediation initiated after May 7th, 2010. I'm going to be saying that date a lot. May 7th, 2010. If you initiated remediation before that, you do not have to use a presumptive remedy. And where? This is at new construction of or change in use to a school, child care center, or a residence. I'm going to be saying that a lot today. Because if you're not changing use or new construction of school, daycare, or residence, then you're not required to use a presumptive remedy. So this is the part that got really complex for us as the committee to figure out. Because it's in the new rules that you don't have yet. It's going to tell you everything that you have to do. So we had to make the guidance have everything that the rule will have in it. And then we're going to have to change the guidance. Because there's going to be, once the rule goes out, then there'll be comments on the rule. So for right now, all that's in there is, in the guidance, has all the shoulds that you are going to have to do and will become the shalls later on once they're in the tech rules. Again, that's after the guidance, the tech rules come out May 2012. Until May 2012, you're going to use the guidance. After May 2012, it's going to be in the rules. So we're going to change everything up at that point. The presumptive remedies are remedies that can be taken off the shelf. It's what's in their handout. You can look at those remedies and say, this is what I want to do. I don't have to ask for the department approval. I can just take it. Here are my instructions, and this is what I'm going to do. But sometimes those don't work, and you need something else. You need an alternative, because the square peg round hole theory that we were talking about earlier, it doesn't always fit. So we have the option of an alternative remedy, and we were going to go over how to develop your alternative remedy, and all of this is in the guidance document, which is now posted online. The alternative, there's a new form. I know you'd love to hear that. There's a new form for alternative remedies that are in your handout, so that you can see, for all of you that are here, it's only 6 little questions. It's not a big form. It's nothing that you should be concerned with. We have a new form because on our first alternative remedy submittal that was made, we kind of lost it in the process. And we want to make sure that your alternative remedy application isn't lost. So we now have a form that's going to be submitted. You're going to submit it with your alternative remedy, and John's going to go into more of that later. But we created this form to help you and hopefully speed through your review process of that. So when are presumptive remedies used? As I said, I'll be repeating this a lot. Schools, child care centers, and residences. If you have a warehouse, you can use a presumptive remedy. You just don't have to use a presumptive remedy. If you want to use one of these capping alternatives that you have in the guidance document, when you're creating your warehouse, go ahead. You should know that that work plan that you're going to submit that has the presumptive remedy is not going to be inspected and reviewed quite so thoroughly, because we know if the remedy was approved and good enough for a school or a daycare center, it's going to be good for your warehouse. So you can use it. It's not, there's nothing wrong with it. You just don't have to use it for a warehouse. So some of your remedial options are an unrestricted use remedial option. There are certain scenarios where in the guidance document, and will be in the rules, we're going to tell you you have to clean it up, such as a discrete area discharge. There are other things that you can see on Table 5.1. Those are your presumptive remedies. Those are your capping options. And a third option you have is an alternative remedy, which again, John will go in more detail in a little bit. That remedy requires pre-approval by the department. The other two don't require pre-approval, but the alternative remedy does. But there are other options, other requirements. In these scenarios, you must submit a work plan to get it approved by the department. It's not that it's an alternative remedy, it's these scenarios we've determined can be so complex that if you're going to build a school, child care center, or a residence on an unexploded ordinance site, we want to look at it. We just want to make sure that it's okay. If you're going to contain free product, not if you're going to remove it or treat it, but if you're going to contain it and leave it there, we want to make sure that everything's going to be okay. If it's a landfill that does not require leachate or gas collection, we want to look at the work plan. And if the site is a landfill that requires leachate or gas collection and it's a multifamily residence only, we want to see the work plan. And the reason why does not is underlined and you have the development is limited to a multifamily residence only is because of the next slide. This is actually prohibited in the legislation. If you have construction of a single-family residence or school or child care center, it is prohibited when a landfill requires leachate or gas collection and treatment. So you don't have an option. It is prohibited. The other ones, you can go back to the previous, go back, there you go. These you can submit a work plan for, and we will review and approve it. For the other landfill, it is prohibited, and you have no choice. You cannot do it. If you submit a work plan for it, it will get rejected. Okay? So when must a presumptive remedy be used? Any remediation initiated after May 7th, 2010 for an entire site or just part of the site, just an area of concern. That works too. For new construction of or change in use to a school, child care center, or a residence. As I said, I'm going to be saying that a lot. So what does initiate remediation mean? Well, I've got to tell you, this was a very difficult concept for us to come up with. So we're making it very simple. Initiate means the beginning of, the start. So if you have started, if the remediation was initiated before May 7th, 2010, you do not have to use a presumptive remedy. So for cases that are ongoing with the department and you have a case manager assigned, chances are it was initiated before May 7th, 2010, and you are not required to use a presumptive remedy. So if you have a discharge, an issue trigger, you notify of a new discharge with a new notification form, all of those are new discharges, and those will require a presumptive remedy, again, if it's a school, daycare, or residence. Remediation, that means anything. So if you started the PA before May 7th, 2010, you're not required to use a presumptive remedy. So again, what does new construction mean? New construction or an addition that expands the footprint of the building. So if you're just remodeling a room, that's not new construction. It has to increase the size of the building. Change in use. That means it wasn't used as a child care center before, but it is now being used as a child care center. And it also means moving the child care center from the upper floor to the lowest level floor. So the presumptive remedy is only required at the portion of the site that is subject to the presumptive remedy. So if you have a child care center that is going to be used, you're building a child care center at a portion of the site, it's only the portion of the site that is going to be used as the child care center and with the sensitive population is going to be used, that's the part that's going to be required to have a presumptive remedy. And I'll go into an example of that in more detail in a few minutes. A presumptive remedy may be used at other contaminated sites, as I said before, with the warehouse. You just don't have to. So just in case anybody thought that if they used a presumptive remedy, they don't have to follow the tech regs, I'm here telling you right now, you still have to follow the tech regs. You still have to remove free and residual product. These capping options don't take away these other basic requirements. You still have to get your remedial action permit. Just because you're using a presumptive remedy, which says that you're leaving contamination, doesn't mean you don't have to follow the permit requirements for this. And any other part of the tech regs that I have not mentioned here, you still have to do. The presumptive remedies in addition to those requirements. And those, again, for schools, daycares, and residences. So, now we're getting to the heart of the guidance is that table that you have. It lists your remedial options, it lists for different types of contaminants, and it lists for different types of uses on the property. It is currently in the guidance, and it will be in the revised tech rules. So table 5.1, we did this in color for you in your handout, and it's in color in the guidance document, and to try to help you see what the different options you have. The contamination type is your first column. You have your categories and your scenarios in the second column. You have presumptive remedy and remediation goal, whether it's a restricted use or an unrestricted use remedy. And in the last two columns, you have one column is for schools, child care centers, and residential type 2, and the last column is for residential type 1. As you can see on the table, there are sometimes 2 or even 3 options for you to use as a presumptive remedy, and I will go into this further in the examples. Not on this chart, but in the guidance and in the rule, there are certain areas that are going to require unrestricted use remedies. I mentioned the first one already, a discrete area discharge. A discrete area discharge is an AOC that is estimated to have 300 cubic yards or less of contaminated soil. So basically our point for these are if you can dig it up, we want you to dig it up. These again are schools, child care centers, and residences, and we want to make it as safe as possible. So if it's gone, it's better. Widespread PCB contamination at a residential type 1 facility. We want that to be cleaned up. We don't want you to leave the PCB contamination there. So I've been using the term residential type 1 and residential type 2, and I'm sure you want to know what they are. And this was a very complicated issue for us to figure out, really, because trying to define the two, we knew what we meant, but trying to put this into words and make all the lawyers happy was another issue completely. So residential type 1 means anything that's not type 2, and that was the lawyers for you. And residential type 2 is basically trying to say if there's a governing authority, then it's a type 2. If there's something that's going to stop the person from going out and digging, if it's an apartment building, so you have an apartment owner, if you have if there's a community center, you know, a center you have an apartment, a housing development, and there's somebody over that. If there's a If there's anybody else out there, common areas of the condo complex, rental units, all of those have some other authority on top of the individual homeowner who's going to go out and do the digging. So there's somebody to kind of stop them. That's residential type 2. So we now came up with, and this is what's on your table, 4 components of a presumptive remedy that's on table 5.1. And this was to help the LSRP when trying to develop the alternative remedy, which John will explain later. We came up with the 4 parts for you. So the 4 parts, the top one is the barrier, which prevents initial exposure. You have the buffer, which is in case the barrier is breached, we have something else. We have the demarcation, so that if you breach the top 2 layers, there's something there to say, wait a second, something's wrong here. And then we have the monitoring aspect. So to make sure that that it's not breached beforehand, but we do have somebody looking at it, again, to make sure that exposure is limited. Well, this is a very touchy subject. There is also, in the guidance document, and will be in the rules, a requirement regarding vapor intrusion. If you have new construction, before you construct your building, we want you to put you want to install a subslab depressurization system. That is regardless of whether there is a trigger. Feeling is, while you're constructing the building, put it in. In the groups that we have talked to, that seems to be more commonplace to actually put this in, for whether it's for radon or for other purposes. Putting in this system seems to not be a big deal before construction, and this is something that will help protect the sensitive population in the case of a discharge in the future. But what do you do for an existing structure? Well, we want you to sample it just to make sure that the sensitive population is okay. Again, this is regardless of whether there's a regular trigger in the VIG. We want you to do these things anyway. So now I'm going to go through a couple of examples. Now, this is my official disclaimer. These are only examples, and therefore demonstration purposes only. Any resemblance to an actual case is purely coincidence. So these were just trying to give you ideas of how to use the table. So you have a site with various AOCs, and you want to construct an apartment complex. So the first area of concern we're going to deal with is the dry well. So this is an example of a discrete area discharge. Probably has less than 300 cubic yards of contaminated soil, and we're going to dig it up. So we're going to excavate until you get to clean soil standards. The next thing that we're going to deal with is the VOC component. Again, we're going to put in the system because this is a new building. And if needed, we can convert it to an active system if it's needed once the system's up. But that depends on your site-specific scenario. And again, because there were issues with volatile organics in the groundwater, other things might be needed. Historic fill. Well, that is what most of is on your table is regarding historic fill. So we have your building, your landscaped areas, your maintenance areas, and your playground. Remember, as I said before, you still have to get your remedial action permit for soils if you're going to leave contamination behind. So here's your site. You have your maintenance area, your parking lot, your playground, some landscaping, and your apartment building. So we already talked about the apartment building, and now we're going to talk, here's the area under your building. This is your 6th row on your chart. So if you'd like to look at your chart, I'm going to be, for the next couple of slides, I will be calling out what row, so you can look at that and follow along. you can see that there are two options. You can use either option 1, which is 4 inches of concrete, 4 inches subbase, visual boundary marker, and annual monitoring, or you can use 1 foot of clean fill, another foot of clean fill, your visual contamination boundary marker, and semi-annual monitoring. You can't combine them. They're not take the barrier from one and the buffer from the other. It's all option 1 or all of option 2. Your next one is the landscape areas. Again, you have, this is on the 8th row on your chart. And again, you have 2 different options. There is a note on that for a root ball. And basically that note is trying to tell you that we want to make sure there's clean soil around that. So when you put the tree in, depending on how far you have to go down to put that root ball in, we want to make sure there's clean soil around it. For the maintenance area, this one you only have one option, and that's on your 9th row on your chart. And this is what your option is. And then for the last thing in the area is your playground with mulch, and that's your 1st row on your chart. And again, you have 2 different options. And your options, we tried to have different things that we thought you could have at the site. Again, if these aren't your scenarios that what you want to do, you have the option of submitting an alternative remedy that John will explain. So for case example 2, we have an industrial site that we are going to just convert one of the buildings that are currently there. It's going to be converted to a child care center. Because this site, the people who own the site, they want to take care of their people, and they're going to put a child care center for their employees in one of their buildings. And it's the same type of areas of concern that we had before. But now we have the new child care center. On one side, you have your utility corridor, you have a playground, landscape areas, parking lot, and the industrial building. The industrial building is not subject to presumptive remedies. So we shouldn't be considering that part of the site at all. So for the drum storage area, which is going to become the playground, you have your option looking on your 2nd row of your table. And this has 3 different options. And again, this assumes that your rubber matting is the top layer and all of the things in the barrier layer are underneath it. For the utility corridor, which is on the 10th row, this again was a little more complicated, and we just wanted to make sure that there was a clean corridor for anybody who is going to be accessing the utilities for them to go in. So all this wording is trying to say, make sure there's clean fill around and below where the utilities are going to be. Remember that a VI investigation is also required for the reuse of the building, and all of the other tech reg requirements that are still required, as I mentioned earlier. One last thing I want to discuss is we have the parking lot. So this parking lot had 8 inches of asphalt over sand. And the presumptive remedy required 4 inches of asphalt over 4 inches of a subbase and a visible contamination boundary marker. In this case, your existing site conditions meet the requirements of a presumptive remedy. The top 4 inches of the asphalt is the 4 inches of what your site has. The second 4 inches of the asphalt could be considered your subbase, and the sand could be a visible contamination boundary marker. So all you have to do is add the monitoring, and you don't have to change any of the existing site conditions to meet the presumptive remedy requirements. And now I'm going to hand off to John. Well, we'll take questions at the end.
Morning. Okay. So as Lynn alluded to earlier, the what here is the Site Remediation Reform Act, Section 35G, it provides for use of alternative remedies under certain conditions. Again, after sites that have initiated remediation after May 7th, 2010 are required to use a presumptive remedy if they are what? New construction or change in use, everybody at a school, child care center, or residence. Following Lynn's earlier example of the warehouse, if you're building a warehouse, you don't need to implement a presumptive remedy. Therefore, the department's not going to review and approve an alternative remedy. It's simple as that. Next slide. You can use an alternative remedy if you can demonstrate that your remedy is as protective as the presumptive remedy would have been over time, or if you can document that there are conditions that exist at your site that make it impractical to implement either an unrestricted use or a presumptive remedy. And as Lynn mentioned, alternative remedies will require prior department approval. And prior means before you implement. What do you do to get approval for an alternative remedy? You submit your alternative remedy proposal in the format of a remedial action work plan, and this only needs to be, and we encourage you to follow this, for the portion of the site that's going to be used for resident, school, or child care, and that you're going to implement the alternative remedy. We don't want you to submit an entire work plan and then have the thing get kicked back for your alternative remedy. So you submit your alternative remedy prior to your full site remedial action plan, include the new alternative remedy form. I have a copy of that right here, and it really is short. In fact, the form itself is shorter than the instructions. And also note that the alternative remedy form can only be signed by an LSRP. They are not eligible for implementation by subsurface evaluators or for pre-existing cases. Let's see. When you submit your whole site work plan, include a copy of the DEP's approval of the alternative remedy. Right now, the department is telling us that alternative remedy turnarounds will be 2 to 4 weeks, which is a lot better than what we've had in the past. Now, how do you develop your alternative remedy? Well, the first thing you have to do is look at your site. What is the use of the portion of the site that you're going to implement the alternative remedy, and evaluate what the presumptive remedy would be using Table 5.1. Then you compare what you want to use as your alternative remedy to the presumptive remedy and identify which components vary from the presumptive remedy. And then you would augment one or more of the remaining components to compensate for any shortcomings that would be in the existing layers. My first example harkens back to Lynn's example with the auto dealership and repair. We're going to focus on reuse of a parking area. This is the apartment building scenario that Lynn was referring to. The parking area you can see is on the right-hand side there. The normal presumptive remedy, according to Table 5.1, would be 4 inches of concrete or asphalt, a 4-inch subbase, and a visible boundary marker. Add to that annual inspection, and you have what would be a presumptive remedy. Now, again, this is my official disclaimer. Any resemblance of these examples to actual site conditions is unintended. And I also want to add to that that these are what we would consider approvable alternative remedies, but the approvability of any individual proposal will depend on all the conditions at the site. So under that first example, let's say the current site conditions are that there's 5 inches of concrete, 2 inches of subbase. Well, your barrier is more than would be needed under the presumptive remedy, 4 inches versus 5 inches. So we'll use that extra inch of concrete to make up for a thinner buffer layer, which is 2 inches versus the required 4 inches. So while we don't need to modify our buffer, we can say that our barrier layer is more protective because it's thicker, and that makes it more durable. Another variation on that theme is, let's say we only have 3 inches of concrete and 2 inches of subbase instead of 4 inches and 4. Well, if you go back to the last slide, we approved 5 inches and 2 inches. Why can't we improve 5 inches and 2 inches here? So if you took this site and you added 2 inches of concrete to the existing 3, you have an approvable alternative remedy. On this next variation, we have our 4 inches of concrete, or 4 inches of subbase, but there's no demarcation layer. So what you might want to propose doing is, instead of annual monitoring, go to semi-annual monitoring, and that increases the protectiveness of what would be otherwise a non-compliant remedy. On this one, we have a very thick concrete layer plus our 4 inches of subbase. So instead of having annual monitoring, we can reduce the monitoring frequency to every 2 years instead of annual. So this is an example of how it goes both ways. You can use an alternative remedy with existing site conditions to reduce how much work you have to do for your alternative remedy. Now, that was for equally protective remedies. What if you have site conditions that make a presumptive remedy impractical? Again, you would look at what would be the presumptive remedy on Table 5.1 for your site or your AOC. Evaluate your site conditions. Some of the conditions that may make a presumptive remedy impractical might be steep slopes, soil conditions, bedrock, shallow water table, extensive dewatering, wetlands. You don't want to add cap layers to a wetlands, and existing structures. And then propose an alternative remedy that's protective. How's the department going to evaluate the alternative remedy proposal? They're going to look for substantial or excessive impact from the conditions on the site. Combinations of multiple conditions certainly make alternative remedies more approvable over presumptive remedies. And the prohibitive costs that may result as from these conditions or combinations of the conditions. And again, it may be one extreme condition that makes your remedy, your presumptive remedy, or your unrestricted use remedy impractical, or it may be several conditions that combine to make it impractical. Examples might include existing buildings on or near the site where you don't want to jeopardize the structural integrity by removing or raising topography around them. Existing buildings can also make it difficult to get at areas of concern that need to be remediated. Dewatering, if there's no other way to control groundwater and you can't, it's not practical to dewater at some rate that would make it possible to do your remediation. That's a condition that may require an alternative remedy. Floodplains, wetlands, you don't want to be capping those because then you are raising the level, and that gets into a whole other set of complications. Your alternative remedy proposal needs to demonstrate that the presumptive or an unrestricted use remedy is impractical. I've said that a couple times. But you have to be specific about the conditions that make it impractical and why they're impractical. Describe the alternative remedy. Don't just say, hey, I can't do a presumptive remedy, so I'm not going to do anything. You need to be specific about what you want to do, and the closer you can get to what we have on Table 5.1, the easier it will be to approve. My last example, a former junkyard with numerous discrete area discharge. The presumptive remedy would be unrestricted use remediation of each discrete area, but as Lynn alluded to earlier, the guidance document allows you to look at the number of discrete areas and the area of the site and compare that to see if you can use what would otherwise be a presumptive remedy. So you look at the number of discrete areas, compare it to the size of the site, and determine whether you can implement a capping remedy rather than an unrestricted use remedy. And again, if you pick something off of Table 5.1, it's easier to approve. Now finally, if you don't take anything away from today, take away this slide. Okay? Remember that presumptive remedies apply to schools, child care centers, and residences for sites that initiate remediation after May of 2010. Second, alternative remedies may be proposed in lieu of presumptive remedy if they are either A, equally protective, or B, impractical due to conditions at the site. And finally, remember that an alternative remedy must be approved prior to implementation. If you want more information, here's some contact info for Lynn and myself and Neil Rivers, who also work very diligently on the guides. The documents are posted on the website, and I understand the recording of today's presentations will also be posted. And that's the web address. And now Lynn and I will take questions, but one thing I do want to say before we start taking questions is we'd like you to keep your questions to non-site specific type questions. If you do have questions about a specific site, the department would be happy to meet with you to discuss those or talk to one of us afterwards.
I just want to add one more thing. The examples of the alternative remedies are not necessarily going to be approved. Those are examples for example purposes. Submit your alternative. Don't point back and say that they were on your slide. You need to take in all the information that is pertinent to your site to make it sure that it is acceptable.
So Ann is going to come around to anybody who has questions. Who was the lady who had a question before? Okay. Go. Thanks, Ann.
This is more an internal DEP question. I just wanted to note there will be a group here working specifically on presumptive remedies within site remediation.
As of right now, the group is me and Kathy Kunz, who's the TC in charge of reviewing all of the alternative remedies. So far we've had one, and we've been able to handle it. So we'll see if that will change as more comes in.
You mentioned when a tree is planted about putting clean fill around the root ball. What happens when the tree grows and the roots extend into the contamination? If that tree dies and a landscaper has to remove it, there's potential exposure there. Is there any provisions for that?
I understand the question being that what happens when the tree dies, and if the tree had grown, which we anticipate that happening, yes, the roots will eventually go into the contaminated soil. The hope we were trying to get at is if the tree dies right away, you have that clean area to go back in and replant it. But that if we couldn't say that this is a tree that's expected to have a root ball of 20 feet wide, and that you need to go 20 feet down and 20 feet wide, because there's a possibility of that happening with the tree. Would have liked to have said that, but we did realize that was not very practical.
Let me add to that. In practicality, if the tree lives long enough for those roots to extend 20 feet beyond where you originally planted it, and it dies and you're going to want to replant the tree, chances are you're going to replant something smaller, a lot smaller, and it'll probably be within that root ball plus 1 foot buffer.
We're going
Okay, 1 second. We're going to take one from our web participants. The first question is the August 15th rule, a final rule or a proposal, and if a proposal, when will the final rule be published? Yes, it's a rule proposal, and there's going to be a 60-day public comment period, and at that point we anticipate by May 2012, we hope, publish the rule adoption. So it will be adopted on or after May 2012. Do one more. To demonstrate protectiveness, is risk assessment considered to be necessity or useful for any case scenario?
Thanks.
I'll let you answer that one.
To determine equally protective over time, we just want you to compare the barrier layers and propose in your judgment as an LSRP why you feel that it would be equally protective over time to make your changes that you're proposing. If you are going to submit for an alternative remedy because it is impractical due to site conditions, then you would have to prove why your remedy would be protective. You need to do what you have to do as an LSRP to make that determination. I don't want too much information, but we need enough to agree with your determination. Can't just say because. Kathy, did you want to add anything? Okay.
My question is about the utilities. It seems that most of your diagrams showed on-site only, but most utility work, especially new construction, existing construction, they tie in needs to the streets. Are those going to be pathways that you're going to have to put the 2 feet clean fill around as well? Or?
No. We openly ask for what is on the site and what the sensitive population would have access to the contaminated soil.
So all the historic fill in the street or anything like that is going to be left?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Anybody else over here?
Wait, Ann.
You want to do one more from here?
I was going to do this.
Oh, all right, read it.
If homes are going to be built on a golf course, which is not in the SRP program, and there is no known discharge or hotline, does the presumptive remedy for pesticides apply? Love the question. If it is not a discharge and is not in the SRP program, then you are not required to use a presumptive remedy. That's what I'm doing.
The question I have is related to landfill building prohibition. What distance is that listed in the guidance? What's the distance that you're prohibited from the presumptive remedy?
If you're building on the landfill?
Well, you had the landfill building prohibition, like you're not allowed to
build on the landfill.
Build on the landfill, or how far down gradient is it from that landfill?
It doesn't say that. It just says you can't build on the landfill.
Okay.
Is the alternative remedy form on the website? Yes. No, it is not. It is in draft form right now that the lucky attendees here have gotten, and as soon as it can be put on the web, it will be. Are crushed stone caps allowable? If so, great. If not, why?
I think the answer to that is yes, because they qualify as clean fill. So they would fit in the options where you have clean fill layer as your barrier buffer.
Okay, I have another question. You have the residential type 2. In some scenarios, you have a homeowners association. However, they still can do activity on their own property. So
Then for the areas, if I understand what your question is, if the homeowner association has authority over a common area, then the common area is considered a residential type 2, but the homes are considered residential type 1.
Okay.
Any update on when the LSRP exam will be? No, we don't have an update.
Go ahead, do one more.
Is a deed notice, I guess now known as a remedial action permit, required to ensure no residential school or child care center use if the presumptive remedy is not implemented? No, there is no requirement in your deed notice to say that you can't have a school child care center or residence, but once the new school child care center residence is put on the site, that is when the presumptive remedy requirements must be met.
I had a question. How will the department evaluate costs when evaluating impracticality when an alternative remedy is proposed?
When the department would consider cost in evaluating the impractical due to site condition aspect of an alternative remedy in conjunction with the other aspects of your site and the other conditions at your site that are making it impractical. So you would have to explain to me why that, for example, you have to implement the presumptive remedy would cost you $2 million, and the cost of the site and your improvements would only be $50,000. It's impractical to implement that due to the site conditions. There is the understanding that every presumptive remedy probably could be implemented with an unlimited budget and unlimited resources, but there will be that condition that we realize that, yes, we can do this, but it's just not practical. But you'd have to convince us as to why it is impractical based on your site conditions. It's not something I can really give an example of here because it depends on what's at your site and why your site conditions are making it impractical to implement.
So I guess it's one of those things that when we were talking about it, we came to the understanding that it's you'll know it when you see it kind of thing.
So you're actually looking at the value of constructing the alternative versus the value of property improvements?
No, I'm saying that if your site was to, okay, for an example, you have numerous discrete area discharges. You could go and actually remove each discrete area discharge on a very small property, and then you would have to backfill and keep the equipment out longer and backfill each area and compact it and then go and maneuver it around and get to each individual area. So everything is possible, but there comes to a point when the cost, it just doesn't make sense to do it that way. And that would be what you need to explain to us in your proposal as why it has to do it. It's going to be basically your site conditions, and you can add the cost as part of that. But if you just tell me that the cost will be too much money, that's not saying due to conditions at the site. You have to bring it back to your site conditions.
So I guess my question is, if we present the costs, what are they relative to? What are they going to be evaluated against?
It's going to be related to your site conditions. You have to explain your site conditions and why, based on your site, this won't work. It's not relative to a particular value, dollar amount. It's why, due to the conditions at your site, and that whole aspect of the alternative remedy, because it's impractical due to conditions at the site, all of your justification has to go back to site conditions.
It's the cost of implementing that.
It's the cost of implementing it.
Presumptive remedy. If it will cost way too much.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Did you have a different question?
If we implement a presumptive remedy at a site that is not proposed to be redeveloped as school residences or childcare? Can we implement the remedy without submitting a remedial action work plan?
Say that one more time.
If we propose to implement a remedial action, a presumptive remedy, do we need to submit a remedial action work plan for sites that is not proposed to be used as, that is not considered a sensitive population?
If you use a presumptive remedy at a site that's not a school, child care center, or residence, you just indicate that on your remedial action work plan form. And that's how we will identify
You have
it.
to submit the work plan, but you don't have to wait for approval.
That I understand, but if I'm implementing a presumptive remedy, why do I need to submit a remedial action work plan?
You have to submit a remedial action work plan for every site, and you have to submit your remedial action work plan form for every site. We just will, our inspection and review of that document will be different.
Right, that's separate.
Right.
Did you want to take one off the board?
Where are we? Does the DEP have any guidance or performance specifications for sub-slab depressurization systems or vapor barriers that can be provided to builders and contractors? Yeah. Big?
The vapor intrusion guidance document.
It's coming.
Right.
Jonathan.
Yes, I can agree with that. Related question. Remedial actions. You mentioned for vapor intrusion that existing buildings should have a VI investigation, which is sort of not a remedial action, but part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get an alternative
Yes.
to that as well?
Yes, and that is in the guidance document. If you want to justify why you don't want to do that and why your site conditions would make it equally protective over time to not do that, then you can submit that to the department and explain to us why that's not needed.
Okay, and I would just add one caution to that because the alternative discussion mentions volatile organic compounds, and in fact, vapor intrusion is not limited to VOCs.
Yes.
It can be other compounds
Yes.
as well. Okay.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to technical impracticability. I was just curious, would it be advantageous to also, I guess, follow the guidance that's not out yet, or I don't know if there's forms or whatnot, but
You want to
in relation
we
to
specifically did not use technical impracticability. We used technically impractical.
We are using impractical due to conditions at the site.
Right.
Totally different.
It's totally different from technical impracticability.
fair enough. And I just had a question on case example 1. It said the dry well to excavate the AOC to comply with residential direct contact soil remediation standards. Why would that not be impacted groundwater?
You would also have to do that as well. We're just saying that you have to, the most stringent soil standards, if your issue is impacted groundwater, you would have to go down to that as well. Most of what the presumptive remedy is direct contact to soil. That's the aspect that we're looking at.
Okay.
These are all soil cap issues. You still have to do all of the other issues of the tech regs.
You still have to address IGW soils, groundwater contamination, free product, vapor intrusion, all that stuff.
What do we have to here?
What is the basis for the thicknesses of the barriers being required?
They are what we thought would be protective, with a lot of discussion and input from our stakeholder groups and comments that we received back on our guidance document. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. This is all concerning cases after May of 2010. What about all the cases that have already existing? How are those issues going to be handled with redevelopment that would meet presumptive remedy criteria?
For cases where remediation was initiated prior to May 7th, 2010, which are not required to use the presumptive remedy, they are not required to use a presumptive remedy. They can. If an LSRP chooses to use a presumptive remedy, that's great. If they don't choose to use a presumptive remedy, That's fine too. They still have to meet their requirements of being protective at a site.
Okay. And you'll need your case manager's approval.
Right, but we're not going to have case managers come next year.
Right. We understand that. But the definition, what we came up with is the law said for remediation for sites that after May 7th, 2010. So we can't make requirements before that.
Right, but once you opt in, then you're
The LSRP would make their decisions about what's protected because that's according to their rules that an LSRP has to make sure that the sites are protected. We're doing one here?
Yeah. If using a presumptive remedy, including VI mitigation, when there is no trigger for a VI concern, when can the LSRP issue the RAO? Does he need to wait until residences are constructed? What if that doesn't happen for 3 years and all other AOCs are remediated to an unrestricted use?
For a VI, for new construction of, they would be putting in the system. They would not have to wait for the buildings to be built. They would be putting in the sub-slab system in at the residences, and then they would be done and would not have to wait.
Right. You won't establish your deed notice and get your permit until construction, but you can get work plan approval. You can go ahead. Well, that's right.
Well, then you could build, then you're, I guess I'll have to think about that question a little bit more.
Yep.
Would it be possible for them to issue the RAO as the property currently exists?
Yes.
And then come back and put in the system when construction?
Or then they would have to sample.
No. Well, you would.
You have to cap the contamination.
Right. You're going to have to remediate a site the way you would remediate any site. If you're not ready to construct, you could issue RAO when you're finished. And if there's a space of time between the RAO and when new construction starts, prior to the new construction, you would have to apply these.
You won't have sensitive receptor exposure before construction.
But you still require a deed notice and some form of encapsulation.
Right, but
which
it
you then
doesn't
have
mean
to
that
rip out when construction starts to put in the presumptive remedy.
Well, that
because you need to have the slab to finalize your deed notice and get your permit.
Well, wait. We're talking about two different things here. The way if you have a site that you have this contamination and you're not going to build homes on it now, then now it doesn't require a presumptive remedy. So now you could do whatever you feel as an LSRP to go ahead with it as you feel is appropriate, whatever that is, because there's no trigger for the presumptive remedies because there's no school daycare residence being built on it now. I mean, this is an odd conversation we're having because there's a lot of site-specific nuances that I think, in reality, these types of scenarios you can come in and we can discuss. Once you've built the school, when you break ground to build the home or the school or the daycare is when you have to implement the presumptive remedy. If for whatever reason you choose to not do that right away, then that's something that you have to figure out as an LSRP, which is the way to do it.
Explain that one to the client. Thank you.
You want to do one more?
This gentleman has been waiting for a while.
I just have a question regarding case number 3 for the alternative remedy for demarcation. You're proposing to increase the frequency of monitoring. However, the purpose of demarcation is basically when you disturb the cap, you want to make sure that you excavate and you know that you're reaching the contamination. I don't see how increasing the frequency will remediate the fact that you need to know what's happening when you excavate.
The question was that for one of the examples for the alternative remedy, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
One of the examples for the alternative remedy is to change the fact that you don't have a visible demarcation layer, that you're going to increase the monitoring. So as the LSRP, you would explain to me, or you could explain to me that by monitoring the site more frequently, you would also be protecting to make sure that the cap is not breached, which is really the main point. We just want to make sure that the cap is not breached. If you don't breach the top layer of the cap, you're never going to get down to that visible demarcation layer.
And if the cap is breached, by monitoring them more frequently, you will catch that kind of a condition more quickly, and any incidental exposure that might occur would be shorter in duration.
I just don't see the two related.
Then you don't have to propose that as part of your alternative remedy.
No, I mean,
That's up to you. You would have to explain it
what
to
will
me.
be good is maybe to propose something when you excavate, so you're there to monitor it when you excavate, so you can see that you reach the marker. However, increasing the frequency may not serve this purpose.
Well, you know where the end of your barrier and your buffer is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be proposing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know it, but the contractor who's going to be doing the excavation, he doesn't know it. That's why you're putting a marker, so he knows that
No,
you're
no,
reaching.
that's not the purpose of the marker. The purpose of the marker is so that the people who are using the property, once construction is completed, know if they've inadvertently breached the cap. If somebody's planting flowers, or they want to put in a swimming pool, or whatever, it's not for the contractor. If your contractor who's constructing your site doesn't know where the contamination starts, you have bigger problems than your presumptive remedy.
No. I mean, whoever is doing the repair, for the planting or, disturbing the cap, he has to know that he reached the limit of the cap.
Right, but then your deed notice, your permit is also going to specify that there is no visible demarcation layer, and that is going to be the owner's or the operator's responsibility to make sure that the cap is not breached.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Give examples of other visual identification of vertical limit of engineering control. Besides the orange snow fencing, you have
Well, there's geotextile
fabric.
You can use orange snow fence. One of our examples proposed the sand layer. If you have a clearly identifiable change in stratigraphy, you may be able to use that as a visual identification, or something else that's not going to rapidly degrade below the ground surface, something that'll be there years to come if somebody unearths it.
Hey, John, just a quick question regarding AOCs that you have alternative remedies for. Say you have a site like you had on your example, have several AOCs, and one or two of them need an alternative remedy. So you'd submit the form for that alternative remedy. You'd hopefully get approved within, 2 weeks, we said?
2 to 4 weeks.
2 to 4
weeks.
Okay.
That is, again,
Optimistically, 2 weeks, we'll say. Now, you would take that approval, and then you do all your remediation with, for the AOCs that need the alternative and the regular AOCs, and then you'd submit all that in one report, or would you want
you
it
still
separate
need
reports?
to submit your work plan for the other AOCs.
Yeah,
so you
and that
take
would
that
be
approval for the alternative remedy,
and that would be in the
include
work
that
plan.
in your full site work plan,
Yeah.
and then submit that,
Okay.
and then go ahead.
Okay,
Now,
cool.
once that alternative remedy is approved, if you're just doing presumptive remedies for the rest of the site, then you can go ahead and do it. You don't have to wait for approval.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I noticed that you have removed the presumptive remedy for historic pesticides. Why that changed? Love the question. Historic pesticides will be dealt with separately from the presumptive remedies. It is not. It is not a discharge. It is being handled separately. There is another group that is going to be addressing that at some point in the future. Table 5.1 for play areas in schools, child care, and type 2 residential structures indicate that 1 foot of clean loose fill is required for the barrier and buffer layer. What is the definition of loose, and how would it differ from the other forms? sorry, the loose fill area, that's considered the wood chips and stuff that's required for playgrounds, and there is requirements for that for the the child care centers have specific requirements for that, and that is what we were trying to acknowledge, that type of material.
Says that you need 2 feet of loose fill, then that's considered.
Yes. 1 foot, and then again another 1 foot.
Yeah, you're not talking active modified level, modified a crush run.
No.
I have a question. A public park surrounded by homes. The park is undergoing construction. You know, they're going to put up new lighting, new ball fields, a building. Would the park itself be subject to presumptive remedies?
The question was, is a public park subject to presumptive remedies? And since the park is not a school, child care center, or a residence, it would not be required to use a presumptive remedy, but the LSRP could choose to be protective and use the presumptive remedies that are available for the playground areas on the chart.
Thank you.
If the remediation is occurring at a non-residential site but residential use is contemplated subsequently, will additional remediation be required? Well, that's a change in use then. So the answer is yes.
If your initial remediation did not meet the requirements of a presumptive remedy, when you changed in use, then additional remediation may be required. Yes.
I just want to get clarity on school definition. I read in NJSA 18A11 the definitions. It's under the age of college is what you're defining as a school.
If in the definition of in the guidance document, there is a definition of what a school is.
Okay.
And I believe it's a public, private, charter school. Yes, and it's under the age. It's not full college level.
Right. So elementary and high school, basically, and middle school.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, middle school, elementary school, middle school, and high school.
What will happen if an NJDEP reviewer disagrees with the remedy selection and judgment of the LSRP, and how will this disagreement avoid becoming an after-the-fact liability to the responsible party?
I'll answer this one.
Please do.
By having your alternative remedy pre-approved by the department and having your approval letter in your work plan, the reviewer should see that, take that as the department approval, and should not be questioning that at all. If the process goes as anticipated, you will have departmental approval and it's in the report. That's why we've separated it out, so you have that first.
If you're implementing a presumptive remedy, you don't need department approval.
Correct. When utilizing a presumptive remedy for a non-required site, should this be indicated on the reporting form? If so, wouldn't this raise a flag or require a resubmittal because the form review specifically indicates the required sites? I believe, and I could be mistaken, that the remedial action work plan form asks if you are using a presumptive remedy and then asks if it's required. So it shouldn't raise any flags because you're just indicating that you're using a presumptive remedy. The questions are there to solve that issue.
If you have historic fill and it's very well characterized, maybe metals, things like that, non-volatile compounds, do you still have to do the vapor intrusion sub-slab system prior to construction?
You can submit your request for not doing that system as an alternative remedy, and we will review it and consider what you have. But you'd have to explain how not doing that would remain equally protective over time.
Thank you.
And that is covered in the guidance document. Go ahead.
Okay. Is there a BOCA or NJDCA requirement for a VI subslab depressurization in all new construction? How can this be a requirement without a NJDEP regulatory or construction code requirement? They're asking about if there's a code requirement for it, and I'm
No.
not aware that there is.
No.
But there will be a DEP regulatory requirement when the rules come out.
Yes. With no LSRP exam date on the table, would the temp license be extended?
That's a question for the licensing board.
Not for us. Any more here? Okay. Is a subslab depressurization system required if soils are remediated to unrestricted standards and there are no groundwater impacts for new construction? If you are building a school, child care center, or residence, it is required. If you don't want to install it, then you have to submit it as an alternative remedy. And that could be your justification as why you don't need to install.
New residential construction on former farmland with no okay, we're getting specific here. Your call.
Again, these are things that you can, the question is new residential construction on former farmland with no indication of groundwater contamination. Would vapor barrier be needed as a presumptive remedy, or would an alternative presumptive remedy approval with no vapor barrier be needed? Anytime you don't follow what is required in the guidance, then you have to submit for an alternative remedy. How will the department keep track of all the semi-annual, annual, and biannual inspection monitoring of the remedies? That's up to...
That's a permitting question.
That's up to the LSRP to keep track of the monitoring requirements and for the owner.
Right.
Just as a follow-up to that last question, all the maintenance and monitoring requirements will be incorporated in the remedial action permit, and as part of the biennial certification that has to be submitted, they'll have to have the documentation showing that inspections were conducted and all the O&M was conducted as part of the biennial certification submission.
Yes.
Yes.
Your turn? No? Okay.
Getting into specific stuff.
Again, these are sites, some of these are getting very site-specific, and that we can just, I'll be very happy to meet with an LSRP or developer or whoever who wants to discuss site-specific alternative remedy questions. Or you could call me or email me at the information that was listed in the handouts and on the slides.
One thing I will say in response to this question is that, as we said in the notes, and it's on the slides, and it's in the guidance document, the presumptive remedy is required only for the area that is going to be used as a child care center, a school, or a residence. You don't have to apply it to the whole site.
Where are we? Can you go over the use of a proposed alternative remedy rather than the presumptive remedy for a dig and haul remediation? While in many cases hotspot removal is appropriate depending on the contaminant, suite, and concentrations, would this not be a deviation from the guidance that requires documentation in the next key document? This requirement is overly prescriptive and limits the professional judgment of the LSRP. Thank you for your comment.
I think, Lynn, after this one, we're going to take one more in-house if there are any more. Then we'll figure out a way to respond to these. There's like 12 more.
Okay.
So I think we're going to...
Is there...
you have something already? No more in here? Anybody else internally? Okay. All right. Do you want to say one last thing to this comment? The one you just read?
No, because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, it says it's overly protected, but I don't think there's much to say about that.
There was an easy one in there, so you want
Well,
copies of the slides.
yes, but all right, okay, then we're going to finish this up. Okay. I want to thank everybody for participating today, either in person or on the web. There are a number of questions still on the web. We will come up with a way to respond to them and share that with everybody. The slides and the audio from this presentation will be posted on the SRP training page in the next week or so. That's it. And we want to thank our speakers. They did a great job. And to everybody here.